Okay, I will call the meeting of the Marathon County Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, to the republic for which it stands, nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have Gail Marshall, Allison Leahy, and Yi Ling Zhang on online, and all members are here. So we'll move on to public comment. Nobody has contacted me about making a public comment. We will move on to then the approval of the minutes from the 26th meeting. What are your wishes? Moved by Supervisor Lemmer to approve, seconded by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion? If not, all is in favor of approval will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right, we'll jump down to 6A1, approval of the 2024 claims and question cost. Christy sent those out. What are your wishes? Are there any questions or motions? Chair Gibbs?
I'll make a motion to approve the claims and questions costs for March of 2024.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Hart. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right, next we'll go to item B, resolution directing staff to proceed with the offer to purchase for the Regional Forensic Science Center property. Are you taking the lead?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Administrator Leonard. You have two items, actually, items 6B1 and 6B2 that I'll talk about in conjunction, and then, of course, you can take action individually. But just to set the stage, I know you're very familiar with the Regional Forensic Science Center project. Earlier today, Public Safety did meet and took up the same two resolutions and forwarded them, approved them with forwarding them to you for consideration. So you may ask, why are we moving forward with these things at this time, right at the same time that the new board is going to be seated here in the next week? The short explanation for that is the operations of local government are not on the same calendar as elections or the reseating of new boards. Simply put, we need to move forward with these two resolutions to ensure that we're in a good position with respect to the Forensic Science Center moving forward. So the first resolution is to purchase the land for the Forensic Science Center. I've given you a recent email update to the full board when we were informed that as a result of the federal appropriations bill, we did receive the $2 million, which is great news. We have had longstanding discussions with the North Central Technical College campus regarding where the facility is going to be located. Bids are currently out. They should come back by the end of the month, thereabouts. And groundbreaking will follow shortly thereafter. So the short explanation is it is our professional opinion as staff that it makes sound sense to own the land or have a long-term land lease for land on which you're going to build a $14.8 million building. Because of the rules that apply to North Central Technical College, they cannot engage in a long-term land lease with the county, so purchasing the land is the only alternative available to us. NTC has had all requisite meetings with their governing bodies, giving them direction to proceed with selling the land to us for purposes of constructing and operating that facility. We've also had conversations with them that any amount of funding used by the county to purchase that land will be provided in turn by NTC in the form of an in-kind contribution to the operations of the project moving forward. So all those things being the case, we're asking for some direction from the full board to move forward to secure that property in advance of construction starting. The second item, there's a memo in your packet that lays out a lot of the rationale for it, but it is calling for and provides for the creation of the forensic pathologist position. Now, of course, you may ask, why are you creating that position before the facility is going to be opened? Very astute question. The reason is laid out in that memo. The reasons, I should say, are laid out in that memo. The short answer is there's a lot of work that needs to be done before the facility opens, whether it's policy finalization, we want to do staff training. We need to, through the budget process, do a fair amount of new position creation. And the pathologist, for a lot of reasons, it's really a good idea to have them on board for those discussions. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have, but our recommendation to this committee is to approve each of these resolutions and forward them to the board for consideration yet this month so that we can move forward with recruiting for that position, because that recruitment takes a fair amount of time based on the professional nature of the position and some of the specific issues with respect to the lack of available forensic pathologists across the country, and secondly, move forward with the purchase of that land prior to groundbreaking.
All right, are there any questions? We'll take them one at a time. We'll take the acquisition of the property first. So are there any questions? Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to go through notes and I can't find them online, so I have to go through my memory. And I remember the price of the land was one price and then another price, and now it's another price. Can you talk about how that valuation is done?
Sure, and I'll allow Corporation Counsel and Chris to chime in. The short answer is NTC is required to sell the land for fair market value. So the size of the piece of property that we need to purchase has kind of changed at some point throughout the process, and NTC has been excellent to work with on that. So the price will flow from that fair market value determination. Again, the important fact for us to remember is that whatever we pay, they're going to put back into the project. So from a taxpayer position, it's not a substantial consideration. I think from the board perspective, it's also not a deal breaker what you're paying, because you're going to get the rest of that in terms of project contribution. But we do need to move forward on the acquisition, because that acquisition will also call for things like continued utilization or perpetual right of utilization of the adjacent parking lot. NTC, as you'll recall, is also going to do site maintenance and parking lot maintenance surrounding the facility. So I know I'm not answering your question as to the specific reasons for some of those changes, but the short answer is the property that we've been looking at has changed, and was one of the reasons why the bids took a little bit longer to get out than originally anticipated. We had to do some site work. But ultimately, in terms of the overall project operations, it's really immaterial. But Mike, Chris, anything you guys want to add to that or expound upon? We're all on mute.
Supervisor Lemmer.
So just to follow up, because that went up, originally I think it was said that this would be budget neutral. Is that still projected to be budget neutral, or does this impact that whole forecast?
When you're talking about this, are you talking about the operations of the Forensic Science Center, or just the project, the construction? It shouldn't have an impact on the construction project at all, because for the reason I said before, anything that we pay is going to be put back into the project construction by NTC. Also, the cost of the land shouldn't have any impact on whether or not the operations of the facility is operation neutral, because based on the capital stack for the purposes that will lead to the construction, there's no borrowing. So the land acquisition cost shouldn't change operations. In full transparency, I will say the one thing that has changed a bit from when we started this 7 years ago to now, and this shouldn't be a surprise, is the cost, the position costs for the forensic pathologists have increased. So Jess and I have had some discussions. We need to continue to have conversations with our local state legislators to make sure we get some statutory changes that will allow us to access funding streams for death certificate certifications. So I'd say the bigger potential is that would have an impact on operations, but we're going to work diligently to ensure that it still remains operation neutral.
Are there any other questions, comments? What are the wishes of
Mr.
the
Chair, I have a question. This is Supervisor Marshall.
Go ahead. Go
What
ahead.
type of project contributions is NTC contributing, and is that out in the contract?
I don't have the specific figures in front of me, Jess. You can add in, but I know that NTC, whatever the land amount is, they are going to contribute toward technology, where the conversations we've had, the IT costs for the facility, because it is going to need some significant technology within the facility, particularly as it relates to technology for teaching, which would certainly be something NTC is interested in. Our staff are certainly interested in that, so that we can ensure that we're training law enforcement and prosecutors and other court professionals and EMS. But the thing that NTC is going to do through the partnership is that continued education piece. We anticipate that our professional staff within the Forensic Science Center would work with NTC staff to address workforce shortage issues as it relates to the medical systems. We'll have training. I think we envision training for people going through a wide variety of professional education tracks, whether those things are, like I alluded to, law enforcement, EMS, but also medical careers. We have a proposed partnership with the Medical College of Wisconsin relative to forensic pathology positions. Anything I'm missing, Jess, or anything you want to elaborate on?
Hello? Okay, that works now. No, you hit all the major topics. So whatever we pay for the land costs will be reallocated towards the technology. So it's kind of a neutral charge there. And the cost of the land is the fair market value that NTC provided to us. It's not a number that we just came up with. It was whatever number they said the fair market per acre is of land. And the training portions that Administrator Leonard had explained are all accurate.
Are there any other
Is
questions?
that market value backed up with an appraisal?
Yes, that was completed by NTC.
Any other?
They have an outside company appraising it. Is that correct? Or is it internal NTC evaluation?
No, by their board, they had to have an external company appraise it. And like we mentioned, whatever the cost of the land is just being redirected into the project. So the entire $400,000 that we're planning on paying will be directed right back into the project, every penny of it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, what are your wishes? Supervisor Lemmer?
I would move to direct staff to proceed with the offer to purchase the Regional Forensic Science Center property.
All right, we have a motion to direct staff to proceed with purchasing of the property. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Hart. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to authorize staff to proceed will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. And I assume that this comes out of the money that we've set aside, so there's no budget transfer involved. So Mike's giving me a thumbs up, so. All right. Now we'll move on to the position. and the language was modified earlier today. The correct language or updated language is in the packet, and it was approved by the Public Safety Committee earlier this afternoon. So any questions relative to the position? Chair Gibbs.
Well, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the staff for putting the memo together. When we look at the Forensic Science Center and the long history that we've had as far as the task force, I think with the things that were spelled out in that memo as to why we're creating this position now really makes sense. I mean, when you build an entity or build an operations, you want somebody there to help develop the policies, develop the understandings, and also be instrumental in developing the facility. And so I fully support the movement of this resolution forward.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, what are your wishes? Chair Gibbs?
I'll make a motion to create a 1.0 FTE forensic pathologist position and move to the full board for its consideration.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, that motion carries unanimously. Vice Chair McEwen, you have accomplished your goal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to thank HR Finance and Public Safety Committee. Through the 6 years or in some months, there's been a lot of up and downs, and I think the delay in the questions that were asked and the changes that were made gave us a better product, and I do appreciate that for the people of Marathon County. I think the service is going to be state of the art, and I believe the input that that Chair Gibbs, myself, and Sarah Severson from Administrator Leonard's office got there. They're very interested in coming down when we do the ribbon cutting for the first shovel, whatever it is, of the project. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the groundbreaking. So anyways, I just again want to tell you how much I appreciate the support that I got and the excellent questions and research by the staff. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to consideration on whether to allocate an additional $20,000 of the opioid litigation settlement funds for purposes of completing the gap analysis of the continuum of care for treatment and recovery in Marathon County as called for in Resolution R1-24. Laura.
Hello. So in your packet, there are two slides, and they're titled Substance Use Gap Analysis RFP Details. The board passed Resolution R1-24 to allocate $50,000 for substance use gap analysis using opioid settlement funds. This gap analysis was what was recommended by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and was approved and moved forward by a recommendation by the Health and Human Services and the Public Safety Committees. So this gap analysis was released, the RFP was released on February 14th. 7 submissions were returned. 3 staff members reviewed them, graded them based on the guidelines that were given. And the top submission that met all the requirements came back at a bid of $70,000. There were submissions that were under the $50,000 guideline, but they did not meet all the requirements. In the other slide, it does outline the requirements that we had in the gap analysis, including conducting research to determine the needs for opioid and substance use treatment, to identify gaps of service or prevention gaps, to identify evidence-based programming and best practice, and to make a recommendation based on impact related to those gaps or in treatment or prevention services. Again, this gap analysis will help determine how we, what recommendations are made in the future about the opioid settlement funds. And so in order to meet those needs, the recommendation from the staff that graded was to consider whether to allocate an additional $20,000 in order to get the desired outcome.
So are there any questions for Laura?
Laura, this is Administrator Leonard. Do you want to, you referenced the three staff. Do you want to say who they are, what departments they represented in that process?
Sure. So we've got Ruth here. We also had Laura Yari, who also helped us as well.
So Ruth is from the District Attorney's Office. If you weren't aware, she heads up their diversion program. And then Laura Yari is the Justice Systems Coordinator that works out of County Administration. I'll give you my recommendation for what it's worth. I've actually had conversation with all three of the people that graded these. I mean, as Laura alluded to, that was the consensus that all three shared, that really this is very foundational work, very important to get a sound gap analysis that, for lack of a better term, covered all the bases. So that's why we're coming back for the board to consider ultimately whether or not to amend that allocation to increase it by $20,000. You certainly have funds available within your opioid settlement funds. But that said, it's ultimately a determination of the board whether or not to move forward in that direction.
Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you. Can you just remind me, is this gap analysis for Marathon County geographically or Marathon County operations? I mean, are we going to look at all of the services throughout the geography of our county, or just what we as a government have?
So the intention is to get information about treatment and services and needs and gaps within the entirety of the county. And so part of that involves data collection, and that is really one of the expenses that the proposals that were under $50,000 would not address, is collecting information. And I think, being the health officer and representing not just the metropolitan areas, but also the rural areas, that we need to make sure that they are represented effectively in this analysis.
Are there any other questions or comments? Again, the proceeds come from the opioid settlement to pay for the additional costs. And this is like designing, I would liken it to designing a building or a project. You want to put the money in to make sure that it's designed properly before you start building the building or the program. And this is trying to collect that baseline information to move forward. Any other questions, comments? If not, what are your wishes? Chair Gibbs?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to support and move to the full board the recommendation of an additional $20,000 to do the needs analysis study. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
All right, there's seconded by Supervisor Lemmer on the motion. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you. So I think it is critical, like the chairman said, that if we're going to do a needs analysis, that we do it comprehensively for the county. And I am confident that the individuals that we had looking and evaluating the 7 responses took that into consideration. So I fully support moving this forward to the full board.
Any other comments? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the motion to allocate the additional $20,000 of the opioid settlement fund for the gap analysis will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. I will move on to the educational presentations and committee discussion. Update on the listing of the tax deed properties on Wisconsin surplus auction site. Kim?
So we just wrapped up our first property auction with Wisconsin Surplus. Yay. Huge shout out to David in my office. He has done a lion's share of the work on this project as far as getting all the information and the data together, working with Wisconsin Surplus to get the listings all correct and answer the questions that are, of course, all part of the process when you start working with a new vendor. And we have just been thrilled with how well this has gone and their responsiveness. They have been, any questions that we've had, any issues that we've had, they have been taken care of immediately. And so thank you for approving this process. It has gone so well on this first round. And we sold several parcels, and we are going to receive a check for $103,201. That will probably just about zero out the outstanding taxes on those parcels. But hey, they're back on the tax rolls, and they will become profitable for Marathon County once again. So very exciting first update. Any of the parcels that were listed that did not get bids the first time, they are just rolling over into a brand new auction. So they will continually be listed on the site until they're sold. So any that we take in the near future, we'll just immediately get them listed on there. And the amount of public input that we've gotten, the amount of questions, the competitive bidding that has happened on a lot of these parcels is really, really great. So I think this was a great way to go to divest of these properties. So thank you.
So, any questions for Kim? I want to thank Kim, Mike, and others for getting this off the ground. Chris, I think you were one of the ones that initiated the discussion. So we're moving toward reducing our backlog of county-held tax deeds, which is a great thing because it does put it back on the roll. So thank you to all for those efforts. Any questions? All right, if not, we'll move on to 2023 year-end budget to actual update. Christie. We're fully functioning with Workday and everything's.
Right. So there, in the end of your packet, what we've got here is this is actually the raw data that's coming out of Workday. And we've got several different ways that we've put it together. Again, these are just coming out of Workday as they are. So the starting one is basically 2023 financial summary. It is the ledgers by fund, starting with the governmental funds and going all the way out to the investment pool fund, which is actually the accumulation of the interest income, which we will, before we end, that will get allocated back to the other funds, but we've not done that allocation yet in the month-end rollovers. So that's still accumulating in that fund. This is basically showing you the trial balances by fund. And so if you want to just scroll down, these are all of them. Usually we will typically present those by fund individually or by governmental funds, and then proprietary funds, internal service funds. So those show you the balance sheet. The next page is the liabilities. Third page is the equity section. And then the next two pages would be the revenues and the expenditures. So at the end of the year, this is something that you would present and you would use for your audit. And it includes all of the funds for the county and all of the accumulated ending balances for the period that you put in. Next section is the budget versus actual for organization. And this is looking at the original amended budget, the actuals for the current period, which is December 2023, the actuals year to date, budget remaining, and then a percentage of budget used. And again, these are all by fund. So you'll take a look at the first page, which is our general fund, and then it lists all of the revenues, and then all of the expenditures with a total also for total revenues and then total expenditures. And then we'll break it by the category and then by the actual, what we would call it, ledger code for each one of the funds. So then you would take a look at these and you would have the budget versus actual for each one of the funds themselves. And you can scroll all the way down to the final page, and one of the other items that you would take a look at then is the very last page, which is how do we look at by department, and that would be the last page of this, which is the budget versus actual by cost center. This actually came out of the raw data from Workday, and then we just created a pivot table to present it by the cost center itself. And again, this would then be by cost center, and those pretty much correlate to department. And there are some mapping issues that we still need to take care of. Again, 23's budget was approved in our legacy system, so we've mapped it over. So there are a few items that we still need to map back to the correct budget. The budget is there intact, but we just need to map it back to the original cost centers. So this would then just show you more of a department budget versus actual based on a department, and we call those now cost centers. So what we're doing next is we are actually working on putting some reports together. Just was on a meeting at 2:00 to put together some more visually appealing reports. And then we are also sorting those out, and we'll also probably be working on some other solutions to get them not only in a more visually appealing, but also being able to process those into such documents as the budget book and some other items. And we are working on that this week with potential some vendors to do that as well. 2 weeks, our auditors will be here, and then we will be finalizing the 2023 information and be able to produce those for you.
All right, are there questions? I think this just was put in the packet, so I don't know that people have had a chance to digest it.
Yep, and take a look. Like I said, our auditors are coming. There are some mapping things that we're still going to be doing. We are cleaning up some of the items. When you take a look at the balance sheet, some of those we need to refine some of the language on those, and the cost centers are pretty self-explanatory, but they're really for you guys to take a look at. And as we pull the data into a standardized template for reporting, we'll be doing those. So these are really for you guys to take a look at. And again, we're still in the process of completing 23, but it at least gives you an idea of how we're able to kind of slice and dice the information.
So as we look at the numbers that you've put in the packet, and I think there's a desire to look at numbers on a monthly or quarterly basis for budget for this year, which of these reports would we have available to us for a evaluation of the current budget year as we move through the fiscal year?
All of these reports can be run. This was run for the fiscal year ending 2023. We can do any of those. We're currently working with our budget application called Adaptive. We need them to help us finalize the rollback of the budget documentation to Workday. But any of these types of reports can be run on an annual basis and a monthly basis year to date.
So what I would request of the committee members, and I understand we're in this precarious position of ending a session of the county board and starting a new one. We don't know who will be on what committees, but to look at it from the context of, is this the type of information that you would like looking at these reports? Which would you like to see on a regular basis? And then we can have that discussion going forward. But I think I'd like to give you a chance to digest that information, and we'd welcome input from others. But I think that given the short review time, it would make sense for us to continue this discussion at the next meeting relative to what your desires would be to move ahead. Does that make sense? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Supervisor
Mr.
Lemmer.
Chair, I'd also like to see the year-to-date March numbers run in this format, because hopefully that wouldn't have quite as many mapping issues, and we could take a look at our position year-to-date first quarter.
As soon as we have the
That could be
information.
sent out to our email. That would be wonderful.
As soon as we have our adaptive, we're working with them to get that back for this year. We had been able to move the legacy system in for 23. We'll be working on those. They would look similar to this as well.
So that's a yes. Yes. Supervisor Lemmer.
Is it possible to get a comparison over last year, or is that data not in this platform?
We'll take a look at that. We had it for adaptive when we built the budget for you guys. So it's something we can do. I'm not sure which will be easier, to write the report in Workday or to push it back through adaptive.
But those are the types of questions that would be helpful is what do you want those columns or rows to represent? So again, take a look at it, and we've had the request to get it year-to-date for the first quarter, and we'll bring that in, continue this discussion at the next meeting. All right, thank you very much for that update. Now we'll move on to interim tax delinquent process update. Mike, is that?
That is me, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Treasurer Beiersdorf could not be present today, but we did have a conversation. She provided me with some updates to share, so I will share those along with my own updates relative to our court process. So we are working through phases 1 and 2 of our in-rem properties through the court system. Phase 1 was the first shot at these, so there were a few growing pains. One major one was getting a guardian ad litem on board who knew what they were doing, and then once we got a guardian ad litem on board, he was subsequently hired by the county as a court commissioner, so we had to secure a different guardian ad litem. That being said, the process is working, I think, pretty smoothly. We should have some significant number of those in-rem parcels that will be added to Wisconsin surplus once the phase 1 wraps up in court, and then phase 2. So we're going to have a pretty smooth process with some additional properties being sold that we'll be able to update the committee on. In speaking with Connie, she's also working with some title companies on private sales for 4 of our other tax delinquent properties. She had been and is getting continued payments on some of the properties that we've notified are subject to in-rem taking. There are some additional delinquency letters that she's pursuing, and so I think we have improved the process. The in-rem tool, I think, is useful. Having the tax deed tool, if we need to use that, is going to be useful as well. So more to come once we add those additional in-rem properties to Wisconsin surplus. I think with Kim's experience, that's going to be a pretty productive platform.
So, Mike, walk me, so we've got the process, and we had a situation where when we had the properties listed in surplus property where the city of Wausau contacted us relative to 2 of those parcels. At what point in time are we providing notice to the municipalities under Chapter 75 and, in the MREN versus the surplus property?
Sure. So the notice occurs at the same time regardless of which route we take, and that's immediately upon our taking. And I say taking, and it's not in the constitutional taking sense, just in case anyone's listening to me. The notice goes out as soon as the county acquires the property. And I think in a few of the properties that were listed on Wisconsin Surplus were tax deed properties that were acquired many years ago. So the notice would have went out many years ago. For every additional property that's acquired by the county, the notice will go out as soon as we acquire it before we list the property for sale, so that those conversations can occur before a sale occurs and not after bidding has started.
So do you know how many parcels were in phase 1 and phase 2?
I do. I do know that information. I don't recall it at this moment, but I can provide that to the committee once I find it, perhaps in an email somewhere. It's somewhere between 35 and 45 in phase 1 and something similar in phase 2. Originally, these were 50 property phases, but there were some that dropped off in each phase from payments and other types of arrangements.
Right. So how does this compare to the old process from your perspective?
Well, although my hair is turning grayer, I haven't been in this position for a lengthy amount of time. In my position, in my work as corporation counsel, we actually didn't do many tax deeds at all. So that is a big change because we're actually processing these properties through. The biggest difference, I think, is the number that we're able to do at once. Instead of having each individual tax deed come to the committee, get approved, go for sale individually. When we have phase 1 completed in court, Kim will love to list 35 properties at once on Wisconsin Surplus. So that's going to be the biggest difference, is having that large amount at one time instead of piecemealing through the list.
Chair Gibbs.
And Mike, you may not know this answer, but the question is, have we made, I know we're in the middle of phase 1 and 2, but where are we as far as historic numbers? I know that the treasurer reported to this committee a while ago that she was making progress on some of the back property tax deeds or property delinquencies, but I also know that we were somewhere around the 400 total number of properties. Do we have any indication that we're actually making progress and reducing that backlog to get to, because we obviously had another year where property taxes properties could have come on. So I'm just, do you have any sense of that?
I don't, but I certainly can follow up with the treasurer, and then we can provide an answer to that question as well.
As an aside, either last week or early this week, the governor signed the new tax delinquency legislation, and I know that Andy Phelps for Wisconsin County is working on a memo. Perhaps at a future meeting, we can talk about what the implications of that might be relative to the whole issue of takings and the responsibilities of the county under that.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And because this wasn't specifically on your agenda, I wasn't going to get into too much detail about it, but I'd be happy to speak to that as well. I've been doing some of my own research after Connie notified me of her work and the Treasurers Association's work on those bills. So I think that will be helpful to the process. So I'd be happy to provide that update.
Okay. Any other questions for Mike? If not, thank you for that. And if you could just forward to us just the number of parcels that are in phase 1 and phase 2, that would be great.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Mike, do you know what's your anticipated date when the kind of phase 1 group of parcels is going to make its way through court and you finally get the order?
I think it's May 24th. Hold on one moment. This answer I can give you. May 23rd.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? If not, We will move on to an update on the American Rescue Plan Act spending. Christie.
I put it in the packet. Right, was she corrected? Oh, okay.
So we have a correction to the one that was in the packet. For those of you that are looking, the old version is on page 26 of the packet, but that has subsequently been updated and not loaded.
All right. So this is a spreadsheet of everything that the county has approved for our ARPA funding. The left column includes all of the projects. The second to left column is your project identification, which is actually the resolution. So each one of them will have the resolution that the funding was approved on for ARPA, and that's what we're kind of using as our project identifier within the Treasury reporting tool as well. Your amended budget is the middle column. Now, you did approve additional resolutions, but some of those we were unable to do, or the project had finished, and therefore we had a resolution to undo some of those as well. So this is what's left out there. One of the items you want to see is that on the projects that have an asterisk by them, those are done and complete. So, for example, the third one down was your participation in the Uniquely Wisconsin Tourism Campaign. That is resolution R07-22. The amended budget was $50,000. The amount of project was 50, and so that budget remaining is 0. And you can see there's an asterisk saying that project has been finalized and completed. So you have an amended budget of $25,026,417. In that middle column, then you'll see the amount of our total allocation is $26,356,580. And you have a remaining funding of $1,330,163 at this time. With that, you have then in the second to the right column, the total ARPA project costs through the end of March of this year. And you'll see the accumulation of the cost for each of the projects. Some projects have not been started yet, and other ones are just being started. One of the things you'll see is there's a bold line here. That references the 2024 CIP, of which many projects were funded with ARPA, and those are then listed below. So that's why that one is just shows the total amount of those projects. And those also have the project work tag to them. So you'll see things like the 24 ME001R, that's your medical examiner rolling stock, and that's the amounts there. So far out of that money, you've spent a little over $9.4 million, giving you a budget remaining of a little over $15.5 million left. Remember that by the end of 2024, all funds need to be encumbered, but they are obligated is the word the Treasury uses, but you have until the end of 2023 to spend them, 2026 to spend them. So that's where you're at as of the end of last month.
In the packet is.
Yeah, so the one thing I had I had first put this total amount, 11,790,000 in there as one lump sum, and that isn't real helpful. So then we just broke out each of them by project, which we're actually tracking most of those by project and workday. And I want to thank facilities, particularly my best friend Barbara Parker over there, who keeps an eye on that and tags every one of our projects with the right workday code, which is super helpful. But I had put those all under one line, and so when I broke them out, I did not pull the formulas down for some of those projects, so you would see that they had some money being spent, but that it didn't then reduce the cost over on the budget remaining. One for a highlight was particularly this HVAC system one. So that's the only difference there. So you'll see those updated ones, and that's where we're at with that. And those are your timetables. So we're moving along, and you can see a lot of those projects that were in the 2024 are starting up, and they are probably going to be ramping up quite substantially, and you should be seeing some of those costs being incurred over the course of this year and probably next year.
Christie, as we look at those numbers, and particularly the last column, budget remaining as of March 31st, I think the concern is that we need to encumber all of our ARPA funds by the end of the year. So I think it will be incumbent upon us to do some truth testing or just updating so that come September or October, we can make any necessary adjustments to those numbers and release those dollars so that they could be available for other programs to be encumbered and spent by December 31st of 2026. So we have to encumber them this calendar year. So I would hope that we'd have the protocols in place to look at it. One of the ones, and I'll just pick out broadband, county support for PSC broadband grants. We've got $1,087,110 in there. 933 plus of that is committed to Frontier for a project that has currently been suspended by the Public Service Commission while they go back and forth with Frontier relative to that grant. If that falls through, we'll need to adjust that going forward. So we're hopeful that the grant issues are worked out, but if not, we need to adjust that.
Mr. Chair, this is Administrator Leonard. I think that, from my perspective, just speaking with Christie right now, I think it's a good idea. We should not only, as you alluded to, kind of make sure we're updating this document very promptly, but I think it's a good standing monthly reporting item to see, to your point, where we are on some of these spending pieces. You referenced the broadband area. The other one is just closing out, projects generally. The Regional Forensic Science Center still has a fair amount of money listed on this spreadsheet as available. That said, we know that that's going to get zeroed out, the 1.4 million remaining. But at the same time, there are projects that are completed, as Christie referenced, that we're going to need to reallocate some of those dollars. The courtroom and audio enhancements, we're just waiting to make sure we have all those bills. That should be all of them, but not that it's a lot of money, but just about $3,500. Some of the other expenses as well. We can note which projects where we believe we're going to have a balance, and then the board can start considering how to reallocate those available funds.
Yeah. And I know another one that's probably getting close to completion or is the Parks Water design. You can, and then some of the other earlier projects for 2023 and 2024 that we've got that we're working on. So a lot of them are either getting closed out in some of those earlier years. And you can tell on project identification what year that was started because the last two digits on that resolution is the year. So you can, and that's why we kind of set this format. And that's why I'd originally put it with just the one line, but I think with all the projects from 24 in list format like that, it's going to be a lot easier for us to update and give you a snapshot of where we are in each one of those as well.
I had just a request if we could put the projects that are complete to the top of the list and subtotal those, then we can identify dollars have to be reallocated currently know about? That would be possible, please?
That's a great idea. I organized them by resolution number, and I have no reason not to do it in a much more informal, informational way. So that's great. Will do.
Chair Gibbs.
I like the idea, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the idea of having this on a monthly update to HR Finance, but I think the other thing is once we are confident that a project is closed out, I'd like to see, at least if there is closeouts, even though it does require a resolution to claw back, reallocate, if you will, back into the unallocated account so that the reporting to Treasury is accurate, but also so that we have an accurate number that's been reallocated that's unspent.
Other questions? Thank you very much for preparing this. I think it's helpful for us. And Gail, that was a great, Supervisor Marshall had a great suggestion for us. And anything else that you'd like to see? And Chris, we're going to really look to you for a lot of those capital projects on the status.
I can provide you with running totals each meeting, no problem.
Great. Any other questions? If not, thank you. This is the last meeting of the session, so we'll defer to the new committee for items for future meetings, but I think we've identified having the financial reports and the ARPA updates. The next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 23rd. We are canceling that meeting because technically we will not be appointed until that evening. So there will be no Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to act, and so we'll go back to the regular schedule in May, so that April 23rd meeting will be canceled. Supervisor Leahy, would you like to make any comments on your last meeting? You're in your last official act or capacity?
I don't have a prepared statement or anything. Just want to say thank you to everyone on this committee and the staff that has helped us. I've been on this committee for 2 terms, so we've accomplished quite a bit with our twice weekly, sometimes thrice weekly meetings. So thank you to everyone who participated, for the staff that has helped us. And yeah, it's been a good time. I look forward to tuning out a little bit, but also, keeping up and watching the next board continue the work of the county. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the committee and the board for your leadership on the capital improvement program process improvements. I think we've got rid of a lot of redundancy and made it a more meaningful process. And thank you for your leadership on those efforts, as well as numerous others. We will miss you, and we wish you well in the future. Any other comments or announcements? If not, Supervisor Leahy would move to adjourn. I'm going to just interject that, if that's okay.
I would be honored. Let's adjourn.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Lemmer. All those in favor of adjournment will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you. I heard her say